Today we're going to be talking about a book called The 12 Stages of Healing by Donald Epstein. It's a book and it's a reference guide. It's a map of consciousness. The 12 stages are 12 themes that tend to show up every time we transform a layer of our defended sense of self and integrate and process the energy that was bound up in our system as a result. We go through 12 stages that are reproducible, common to everyone's experience, 12 themes, and this map of consciousness like that is handy if you're where your awakening process is concerned, because it gives you some context for what your experience is, because sometimes on the healing journey, the awakening journey, there are certain parts of that process that aren't very fun or very pleasant, and so we tend to bail on those parts. But if we know, if we have some context for what's going on and we know that we're going to be okay, that can help smooth things out, because the process is naturally up and down. And it also helps us stay anchored in the present moment. If you're in your thoughts, in the future, in the past, it tends to kind of bog up the awakening process or slow it down or send us into suffering. But if we are staying in the present moment with our experience, that's where the juice happens. That's where things are sort of lubricated and sort of speeds up the process. And so that's where a thing like this and those stages and that map of consciousness comes in very handy. So I'm going to be going over in this video a lot of the lingo that I just mentioned, defended sense of self and so on, and I'm going to be give you an example of each of these 12 stages, and tell you how to use this book and those stages, how not to, and also I have created a tool that you can use based on the 12 stages of healing. What you do is you answer one question or a statement that seems most relevant to what you're experiencing in your life right now, and then it'll print out this like 4 pages of information that tells you exactly where you are as far as these 12 stages of healing go, and give you some more information about that and yourself. Really useful, again, for helping you stay present with your journey. And so I'll tell you how to. You can find that in the comment section. Basically, there's a link there that you can use to find that tool. And yeah, so before we get into it, though, my name is Dr. Jay Eaker. We're here at the Bio-Soul Integration Center in Louisville, Colorado, and I help people embody their soul's gifts and their soul's essence. Been doing that for the last 22 years or so through the hands-on work that I do here at my office, but also I do online work with folks. I have an online course that people can take advantage of. I've written a book called If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose, which is kind of the ultimate guide to speeding up and smoothing out your awakening process. You can find that on my website at www.biosoulintegration. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You might find this here on my YouTube channel. You might find this on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or Pinterest. Do the social thing wherever you see this or hear it. I also have an audio podcast, the Bio-Soul Integration Podcast, that can be found wherever you listen to your audio podcast. So do the social thing. Please share this video with people who are interested, and subscribe to my channel. That would be very helpful. Okay, enough of the commercial. Let's get into this information. So, first of all, I mentioned that this book, written by this man here, Donald Epstein, it is a map of consciousness. It is the themes that we go through every time we transform a layer of our defended self, and the energy that's bound up in our defended self. Every time we transform, integrate, process, release, etc., the energy that's bound up in our defended sense of self. We go through these stages of healing, or these themes that show up. And there are many layers of our defended sense of self. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I think, about how what that is, our defended sense of self, and how that comes about. So it is my contention that from the time that we're born, there's a part of our nervous system that comes online, the sort of base layer of our nervous system that comes online. It's really feeling into our environment, feeling into the people around us, feeling into the energetic back office of those around us, and it picks up on some of their finer points, certainly, but it also picks up on the ways that they have learned from their parents and from the people that they were around when they were conceived and when they were little kids, and so on and so forth. Pick up the parts, the ways in which their system says, okay, this part of me is not okay. This part of me is not safe to, express completely. This amount of this emotion is not safe. We put a limit, a limit on the range and depth of that emotion, and so we end up sort of like fragmenting ourselves and creating separation in our system, judging parts of ourselves as good or bad. And there's a program that gets installed in our nervous system as a result. That manifests physically, where we use tension in our bodies to wall parts of ourselves off, and the energy associated with those parts. We change our posture to keep move energy, or keep energy still, or keep energy from moving. And so there's a physical manifestation of that. Like I said, we put a limit on the range and depth of emotion. We'll give ourselves permission to feel. And then that ties into the stories that we tell ourselves, the unproductive, limited beliefs that we have about what this world is and who we are in relationship to it. And so we pick up those programs, and then we pick them up starting when we're in the womb. Those things get wired into our nervous system and wired into our cells. And then certainly when we're little kids, the same part of our nervous system is still largely running the show until about age 7, when something happens where we kind of like take all of the meaning that we have created from those survival patterns, those defended senses of self, and then we start to project that onto the world and kind of work from that template. So that is our defended sense of self. But there's a way in which doing that, separating ourselves and judging parts of ourselves as good and certain parts as bad and all that, and walling tension off in our bodies and changing our posture and putting a limit on the range and depth of emotion and believing certain unproductive things about ourselves, that whole thing kind of goes against the nature of nature. Life naturally wants you to be whole. There's a template, if you're thinking about the holographic nature of nature, there is a template there, the template of the universe that we entrain to, that wants us to be whole naturally. And so there is this, having done this, separating ourselves and all that stuff, it goes against the nature of nature. And there's a way in which we have to continually apply energy and resources to maintain this separation. There's a way in which life is kind of nudging us towards our evolution, nudging us towards wholeness, and our experience, and a direct experience of wholeness all the time. But we are resisting that because there's this deep-seated, these survival programs, this defended sense of self got installed out of a perceived need to survive. We thought that we needed to, there was no thinking involved. It happened before thinking was available to us. Again, it happens in the womb when we're little kids, but there's a survival imperative there. We feel like we have to fit in with the people around us. We have to tune ourselves the way that the people around us have tuned themselves, because there's this, urge to fit in with the tribe, fit in with the herd. And so it's a survival thing that just sort of happens. So in order to maintain those survival programs, that defended sense of self where we're separated, we need to keep applying energy to keep doing that, because life, through everything that we encounter in life, it is trying to get us to come into relationship with those parts, and it's trying to nudge us towards wholeness. It's nudging us towards the breakdown of those separations in ourselves. And so there's this natural process of sort of unfolding that happens through the rest of our lives, evolution. And every time we transform a layer of our defended sense of self and the energy bound in our system, there are certain stages that we go through. There are many sort of models of consciousness. This is just one of them. But that's what this is. It was created by, again, a man named Donald Epstein, and he is a chiropractor. He developed network spinal analysis, and then also the thing that comes out of these 12 stages of healing, which is something called Somato respiratory integration, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about, give you a little blurb for each of these stages of healing. So stage 1 is about suffering. It's the manifestation of how we have separated ourselves. It's when there's this thing in the psychological world called parts work. It comes out of a model called internal family systems by a man named Schwartz. There's this idea that we have all these parts. Like I just mentioned, we're fragmented. We have all these parts. And often when what happens when we get triggered, when we're under-resourced, when we are in survival mode, one or another of these parts sort of takes over, and we tend to see the world through the lens of that part, experience the world through the lens of that part. That part thinks that it's us. We think that we are it. We identify with it. And we are totally identified with that part, see the world through the lens of that part. And that means that this part, and some part of us that's it's trying to protect us, but it thinks it has to do it all alone. It's like, oh, I have to keep us safe. I have to make sure that they know that I'm smart. I have to make sure that they know that I understand. I have to be right. I have to bolster my I have to be right. These are just a number of the sort of programs that these parts are, jobs that these parts might have to make sure we're right, to make sure we're safe, to make sure we don't experience a certain range and depth of emotion, to make sure our heart doesn't get hurt, to all these different ways that our defended sense of self kind of like shows up in our lives. And so stage 1 is when we've sort of totally identified with one of these parts, and it thinks it has to do it all by itself. And that generally causes suffering, because it goes against the nature of nature. It's not real. It's not living in reality. This one part can't do it. Living our lives through this one part to the exclusion of the other parts. All these other parts causes conflict in us internally, and conflict is responsible for conflict in our lives and suffering. So stage 2 is where we start to become aware that there are other parts. And we start to notice, like, oh, sometimes I see through the lens of this part, and sometimes I'm identified with this part. There's enough space that starts to develop. We become aware of the space that surrounds both parts, the space of consciousness that surrounds both parts, and we become aware of the fact that at certain situations I see through the world, I see through the lens of this part, and in certain places I see through the lens of this other part. And so there's enough room there, we start to see that. As we become aware of that, we start to notice that, oh, these parts are opposing each other in some way. Like, some part of me feels like this relationship that I'm in doesn't feel quite right. But there might be another part that feels like I'm afraid if we leave this relationship that we'll never get in another relationship. These are an example of the sort of thinking, because each of these parts have their own personality, their own thoughts, their own emotions, and that's an example of how the parts are opposing each other, and then consequently we stay stuck. We don't move, we don't change anything, because again, the relationship doesn't seem satisfying on one hand. On the other hand, I'm afraid that I'll never get in another relationship. So we stay stuck, we don't move. This is just an example. My job, I like the money. I don't like the job. I don't like what I have to do. It doesn't feel good. On the other hand, I like the money. There's another part of me that wants to stick with it because of the money. So that there's the way that we are opposing each other. Consequently, we stay stuck, and that's stage 3. That's what happens in stage 3. We start to feel stuck in our bodies, in our lives. Once we move, there are certain things involved with feeling stuck. Frustration generally, grief on some level, that are parts of the stuck process. And once we come to a place where and acceptance, once we come to a place where we just can admit to ourselves that I'm stuck, I don't know how to get out of the situation, all the trying and doing and pushing that I've been, doing to try to get unstuck, all of the programs I've been taking, the coaches I've been seeing, the body work that I've been receiving, the plant medicine I've been using, the therapist I've been seeing to get unstuck, all these things that we're doing to get unstuck. It's like, I am stuck. We're just admit the basic truth to ourselves is that I am stuck and I don't know how to get out of this situation. When we get to that place of acceptance, there's something that opens up in us. It connects us to a larger part of us that is wise and compassionate. We become more aware of the space around both of these parts that are conflicted, that keep us stuck. And we start to move into a stage 4, which is a place where we start to be able to experience those parts more through our authentic self, or this part of us that is wise and compassionate and not judgmental. And this is a very empowering place, because we then get to access the wisdom of both of the parts, these parts that I was talking about. They have their wisdom that we don't get to access when we're trying to just do one or just do the other. When we can hold both of them with compassion and recognize that they're both parts of us and have some acceptance around that, we get to extract the wisdom from those parts. And that's a very empowering experience. And we start to, in stage 4, start to take our power back. Which takes us to stage 5, where we are merging with the shadow. We are merging with the energy that previously we have been pushing away on another level. We're sort of processing, integrating that energy. And in my experience, stage 5 is usually very powerful. It always reminds me of being in the birth canal, of a rebirth. There's a couple experiences I've had in my life where I was in India once. I got really sick. I was kind of losing control. I had a horrendous fever, sort of losing control. My friend, who was a network practitioner, took some contacts on my spine, and I kind of went into this spontaneous stage 5 along with the movement that goes along with that, and I'll talk about that later. But I went into this spontaneous stage 5, and I kind of I had a vision. I saw that something kind of said to me, hey, look, you're going to be getting sick, and your spirit's going to leave your body, and then it's going to go traveling, and then it's going to come back, and you're going to be fine. And the last thing I remember is kind of going through this dark tunnel, which kind of fits with the merging with your shadow, but this dark tunnel with all these I was in India with all these little Indian kid faces around me, and that's kind of the last thing I remember, and I was out for a few days. But anyway, there's something that happened in that experience that I'm still sort of unwinding even today, and that was years ago. So, and it felt like a rebirth, going through a tunnel anyway, when you go through stage 5, it's often a memorable experience, and you kind of know that, oh yeah, okay, big things are happening in my healing journey when you sort of encounter stage 5. And that leads us to stage 6, where with stage 6 we're building energy, we are connecting with a higher source. We're connecting with a part of us that, again, is wise, is compassionate, is not bound by the same shortcomings of these separated parts, is more heart-centered, that is aware of the bigger picture of our lives. And so we're building energy towards moving towards that thing. And so there's some examples of that, like we're building energy towards letting something larger take over, giving up control to something bigger than us. And so the energy, the pressure that builds in stage 6, there's some examples of that, like the pressure that builds in your bowel before you take a big poop, the tension that builds before orgasm, birthing pains that happen before you give birth, the nausea that happens before you throw up. You feel like your car is just nasty and I don't like my car, and then you clean it and you're like, oh, that's the tension, the energy that builds before before you wash your car. Those are examples of stage 6, getting ready, energy building. And then again, that's all moving towards a momentum that's building so that we can sort of unhook control. If we have enough presence, if we have enough capacity to stay present with what's happening and enough momentum, we'll sort of unhook, give up control, enough sort of implicit trust in the process, in our system, embodied enough trust, we can let go and let something bigger than us take over. And that's what happens when you take a poop. That's what happens in orgasm. You gotta let go. What happens with the childbirth? You kind of have to let go and let this thing happen. And this shows up in many ways in our lives. An example of that is the movie Contact with Jodie Foster. I like sci-fi, but the movie Contact, where they download this device from some planet. It's some big, huge energy device. They kind of mess up the first one, and then on the second one she gets to ride. They use her as the driver or the passenger of it, and they put her, and she's in this little capsule, and there's all this energy building up, and then things are shaking, and she's trying to communicate with the command center, and things are shaking, and the signal's getting fuzzy, and she's telling them, I'm ready to go. That's stage 6, energy building, and they just manage to hear her through the static, and they drop her capsule into this pool of energy that's sort of like building up as a result of this machine, and then it takes her through this wormhole, and she's like traveling through space and time, and so that's in the movies anyway. That's an example of the sort of stage 6, stage 7, where we likewise in our lives, enough energy builds up and we give up control, and then something larger than us sort of takes us on this sort of ride of discharging that energy. That energy that's built up becomes like it sort of pushes us, transforms us. And so that's an example of stage 7. And then stage 8, after the discharge, just like the movie, she went through the wormhole, and then she came out into this quiet, super quiet, spacious, still place where she could see the cosmos and see a galaxy, and she was just in awe of the space and the light, and that's what happens in stage 8, emptiness. We through the 6, 7, 8 process, we build up energy. In 7, we discharge. Maybe that means discharging emotion. Maybe that means throwing up. Maybe that means crying. Maybe that means, just various forms of it could be getting sick, having a fever, discharge of the energy that was built up in there. And then after that is emptiness. And again, the emptiness we feel after a poop. How amazing is that? I don't mean to be vulgar, but these are the examples that I have. After you throw up, like, oh, what a relief it is after you throw up, the quietness in the space after an orgasm. These are all examples of the emptiness that we encounter after this buildup and discharge of energy. And next, stages 9, 10, 11, and 12, actually, I don't know exactly what to say about those. I think probably those are stages that are more esoteric, or they're very paper thin. That kind of awareness, enlightenment, like they say, is always like it's right there. It's just that we can't sort of see it. And when people experience it, it was like, oh, it was right there, and it's paper thin and it's subtle, very subtle, but we zoomed in on it and it created this big experience. So stages 9, 10, 11, and 12 are kind of like that, and harder to explain also because those stages, you're losing your mind. Your mind is the tool that your ego uses to maintain the status quo. And in those stages 9, 10, 11, and 12, you're kind of like you're not seeing the world through the lens of your thoughts and your mind as much, and so it's harder to sort of think about these things. But anyway, 9 is where we're aware of the light, we're aware of the energy that's in the background of all of the solid things that we think are solid. Actually, on some level, they're just light. So we might become aware of energy in our body, or see energy, or having psychic experiences might be part of that, like feeling, seeing energy, etc. Stage 10 is called ascension, and where we, for lack of a better term, our awareness, ascends, goes to the spirit world. But then we come back again, stage 11. We bring back the gifts, our soul's gifts that in stage 10, we're more aware. We become aware of our soul's gifts and our soul's essence. We kind of integrate that and then bring that back to this earthly plane again. And the idea is then we're able to sort of give those gifts, express those gifts through these physical bodies onto this physical plane, to the people around us, to our community, to our fellow human beings. And stage 12 is community. So those are the 12 stages of healing as I see them. Again, I have this tool that I've created that you can click. I'll put it in the description. You click on it, you pick a statement that seems relevant to your experience in your life right now, and it'll print out this. It'll tell you what stage of healing you're in. It'll kind of tell you about some of the stages on either side of that. It'll give you a bigger picture of what supports those stages. It's about 4-page printout, give you a lot of information that'll help you orient yourself on your healing journey. So what came out of the 12 stages of healing is something called SRI, Somato Respiratory Integration. In each of these, after each of these stages, there is an exercise. And that exercise involves putting your hands on your body and breathing in a certain way, or maybe moving in a certain way. And the story is, I guess, is that Donald Epstein, the guy that created this stuff, he was working on people, and they were kind of having a deep energetic experience of their body, of these stages, and they just kind of spontaneously went into these movements, depending on what stage they were in. And I guess the common thread, the rumor is that the common thread was these were all people who had done LSD at some point. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I see it like yoga. I imagine that these yoga poses, I imagine that someone somewhere back in the day just had this awakening, and energy was moving, was liberated and moving through him or her as a result, and they noticed that, oh, holding my body in some way sort of facilitates the movement of the energy and the consciousness that goes along with it. And that turned into yoga, and then they said, here, these are the poses that I experienced, like that consciousness kind of like made me do. So do this to get, it's like reverse engineering it. Do this to get this, to have this experience of consciousness that I was experiencing. And I think SRI, Somato Respiratory Integration, is probably the same thing. That again, these people had these experiences spontaneously, and then Donald Epstein sort of took that and said, here, if you want to experience this stage, do this. So yeah, Somato Respiratory Integration. Something else that I want to say is like how to use this book. A way to get the most out of this book. It's not a very easy book to read from cover to cover. And that's because at any given moment there are parts of us in every one of these stages. It's just kind of a matter of where's the majority of us right now? What's kind of coming to a head right now? What part and what stage is kind of coming to a head right now? So you'll read this book. If you try to read it cover to cover, you'll find that this is hard to read because it just really doesn't resonate. It doesn't make any sense to me. But then the next one, you'll read the next one, you're like, oh my God, that's me. That totally resonates, and that's because you're actually in that stage. Whereas the other thing that you read that didn't resonate, you weren't in that stage. And so it's not fun. It's not a very good book in my experience to read cover to cover. But it is a good reference guide. So when you're doing your healing work and you're experiencing certain things, like, oh yeah, you start to recognize, like, this is reminiscent of this certain stage that I was reading about in here. Okay. And they have stories in here about how those stages showed up in people's lives. So that's how I would use it, sort of as a reference guide. It's kind of like, how I wouldn't use it is, in the Western world, we're so like goal oriented, and if there's like a hierarchical thing of like, then this isn't hierarchical, by the way, of steps from 1 to 12. It's like I gotta, if step 1 is good, then step 2 is better, and if step 2 is good, well, step 3 is better, and I gotta get all the way to step 12. But it's not like that. Again, at any given moment, there are parts of us in each of these stages. These 12 stages are kind of nested holes. It's like stage 1, stage 2 includes and transcends stage 1. Stage 3 includes and transcends stage 2 and 1. Stage 4 includes and transcends stage 3, 2, and 1. So on and so forth, all the way to stage 12, where stage 12 includes and transcends all of the other stages. So it's not really a linear thing. And if you try to do it linearly, if you're like, all right, I'm in stage 3, what can I do to get to stage 4? You end up back at stage 1. You end up back in suffering because you're not being present with the stage that you're in right now. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping the progression of the stages at all by having a thought in your mind that, oh, I'm doing this to try to get out of this stage to the next stage. Whenever you're trying to get out of your present experience, it's a recipe for suffering. So that's also how not to use it. Let's see, is there anything else that I said? The other thing that I want to make a point of is that on some level, you're not really in control. there again, I mentioned there's a way in which life is sort of nudging us towards our evolution. There is a bigger force. There's a larger force that's has not much care for our thoughts, for our timing. And so there's a way in which you are not in control. That a stage that you're in is, on some level, it's just going to play itself out on its own rhythm. So again, the best thing to do is to learn how to be present with that stage and to ride it out. And when it changes, see what it changes into, and then do that. So it's sort of like trust the process that way. Again, you're not, I think we don't have as much control over our evolution as we think we do, actually. Okay, the other thing I want to mention is that these 12 stages of healing, it's universal. So it can be used with any modality. So if you are a therapist, if you are a massage therapist, if you are a chiropractor, if you Rolf or whatever, you do sort of transformational work of any level, you can use this book and you can use these stages. So I think that's it. I just want to recap a little bit by saying that, again, remind you that this process, it's happening anyway. This process of your unfolding and moving through these stages is happening anyway. The universe knows what you need from moment to moment, and this is just a tool, this sort of map of consciousness, and that this provides is just a tool for you to get on board with what's happening. And our awareness, our attention is sort of a catalyst for. It's a catalyst. It sort of speeds up. A catalyst is in chemistry, a catalyst is a chemical that you add to a chemical process that speeds up that chemical process without changing the process, and without changing the chemicals that end up getting formed. But it speeds up the process. It speeds up that chemical process, and so our attention is like a catalyst. It speeds up our awakening, can speed up our awakening journey, can smooth it out, and so that's what a map of consciousness can do, is really for. Speed it up a little bit, create less turbulence. And again, I want to remind you of the tool that I've created that you can find in the description. Click on that, pick one statement that resonates with what your experience is right now, and it'll spit out a whole bunch of cool stuff for you. Okay, so that's it. Again, like, share, subscribe to my channel. You can find my book, you can find my online course, you can find resources on my website at biosoulintegration.com. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I look forward to helping you express more life. Have a great day.